any of us ever know what it is to become the perfect version of ourselves.
This is Decoding Superhuman with your host, Boomer Anderson.
Superhuman Nation, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of this Decoding Superhuman podcast. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into all things, well, I guess you can say trendy at the moment in health. That includes ketosis in the ketogenic diet, as well as fasting. My guest today is Siim Land. He is an Estonian author, high-performance coach, biohacker, and student of life in general. Siim has authored the following books, and there's quite a bit, so bear with me. Keto Bodybuilding, Keto Fasting, Target Keto, and Becoming a Self-Empowered Being. You can imagine some of the topics that we're getting into today. Siim has a bachelor's in socio-cultural anthropology. He has a blog, a YouTube channel, and a podcast about human optimization and wellness called Body-Mind Empowerment. In this episode, Siim and I discuss, well, you can probably guess some of these topics, but we get into what is self-empowerment, all things ketosis and fasting. This includes how to build muscle in ketosis, which is something that I honestly sometimes struggle with. And then Siim provides his top tricks, really, for peak performance, and so much more. You can find Siim at Siim Land on all the socials, his YouTube channel, and podcast, as I mentioned before, called Body-Mind Empowerment. Last but not least, there is the Biohackers Summit in Tallinn, Estonia on September 15th. Siim is a co-organizer of this one, and I encourage you all to check it out. I went last year to Helsinki. It's an absolute blast, and if you're into any sort of self-empowerment or self-improvement, this is the place in Europe for you. I'll link to all of this and everything that we discuss in this episode at the show notes, which are at decodingsuperhuman.com/Siim. That's SIIM. And now, a word from our sponsor. As we cover topics like ketosis and fasting in this episode, you'll come to find that Siim and I both look forward to doing these types of things to our bodies in an effort to increase cognition, to increase focus. Well, another tool that I have in my little toolbox over here for increasing cognition is Qualia. Both Qualia and Qualia Mind have significantly upgraded my sovereignty. I encourage you to go check out the podcast with Jordan Greenhall if you want to really understand more about what that means. But Qualia in particular has become a staple in my supplement and nootropic stacks. And when I have a quote unquote get shit done day, Qualia is definitely by my side. Now, if you want to try out either Qualia or Qualia Mind, how could you do this? Well, head over to neurohacker.com, use the coupon code BOOMER, and you'll get 10% off your purchase. If you're interested in a subscription, which I have an annual subscription to this one, you can get 15% off of subscriptions. So enjoy in good health, and now on with the show. Siim, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to have you here.
Well, it's so good to have you here. And I was actually introduced to your work by what I think is a mutual friend, Timu Arina. So thank you for joining us for the show. You're based in Estonia, is that right?
Yes, I am in Estonia and specifically in Saaremaa, which is the biggest island in Estonia in the Baltic Sea.
It's one of my favorite countries. I love visiting there. I kind of tie it in every year with a visit to the Biohackers Summit. So beautiful country. But Siim, I want to get started on a lot of the work that you're producing because you're crushing content. You're producing a ton of work, and I find it immensely valuable. But one of the themes of your content is this concept of self-empowerment. Do you mind explaining that to people and sort of what you mean by self-empowerment?
Yeah, for sure. Like, in my opinion, well, it is one of the things that I focus mostly on because I feel like I myself embody it day by day. And that is like what I strive to do with my daily activities and the content I produce as well. So the concept itself is quite simple. You know, if you dissect it into two components, then the self refers to you as an entity or you as a person or everything that involves you specifically, your body, your mind, your consciousness, basically. And empowerment means, if you translate it, then it would mean, giving permission and gaining the knowledge and improving yourself and also like becoming the greatest version of yourself. So yeah, if you combine all those things together, then it is this non-stop personal development and self-growth in a nutshell.
Excellent. Now, how did you get started down this path? Because I realize you're very young, but there's a lot of people that don't get started on self-empowerment, self-actualization until much later on in life. What caused you to sort of head down this road, so to speak?
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of people tell me, that I'm so young and I've managed to make some realizations or some improvements already. But generally, when I look back on my history, then I would say that I've been an intrinsically motivated learner and very curious about the world ever since I was a kid. And it's maybe it has to do with simply being very inquisitive and curious about all nature around us, what it means to be human, what it means to have sentient experience, and philosophizing over the meaning of life itself. Even when I was a very child, I remember reading like Socrates or things like that, and that they kind of had some sort of a effect on me long term. And over the course of my teenage years, I wasn't that involved with it, as I am now, but I was still wanting to improve myself to some extent, whether through working out, getting good grades, or reading a ton of reading. And me and my brother, we would also be very creative in the sense of we would, fight each other with these imaginary battles of sword fights, or we would, draw things, and we would constantly try to go on these journeys, playing out different scenarios and having fun. So it kind of coincides with this idea of trying to get better and embodying those heroes, these ancient heroes and myths, and wanting to become like them in a sense as well. So, but that's what I think self-empowerment the biggest motivation for my self-empowerment is to become a better hero for those around me as well, and to spread the message of positive impact on the world. And after my high school years, I also enrolled in the military. So that is where things got more serious in the sense of I had to focus more on training. I had to be more disciplined, and that kind of also had a huge impact on me, because it kind of teaches you a lot of things, and for me specifically, it put things into perspective quite a lot. Like I realized that we're living in this very comfortable and safe and secure modern society, and there's this potential for disaster that can happen any moment, whether that's war, famine, natural disasters, some asteroids hitting us, or whatever it may be. I realized that I don't want to take these things for granted, and in order to keep my family and myself secure, then I have to live up to the greatest version of myself every day, and to constantly grow myself.
It's a beautiful message that you share with people. Now, Siim, you've written a number of books, and I'm amazed at the number of books that you've come out with at such a young age. How many books have you published so far?
I would say that it's maybe like 3 or 4.5, because some of the content is gonna overlap a little bit. For instance, like there's these books like vegan keto or vegetarian keto. I'm not really counting them as separate books, because they're simply slightly nuanced, and they're like 90% of the content is the same. Mm-hmm. But the best books, or like real books that I've written, are like keto bodybuilding, keto fasting. Then it's intermittent fasting and feasting, and my first book was Becoming a Self-Empowered Being. So it's it's almost like 5 books in total if you combine all the smaller ones as well.
There's a theme among a lot of your more recent books of this concept of ketosis, and just because we haven't addressed it too much on the show, I'm glad that you've come on, because it's a very hot topic in the health world right now. Now, I guess the first question I have is, given your overall motivation of self-empowerment, what role does ketosis play in that? And if you don't mind, just defining kind of the ketogenic diet while you do that.
Yeah, definitely. Ketosis is this altered metabolic state where your body's normal fuel source, which is glucose, will be shifted over into using like fat and ketone fuel. And usually it happens when you deplete your liver, or you deplete your body's endogenous or inner carbohydrate stores. Then you're eventually going to shift over to producing ketones. from your adipose tissue and body fat. And it happens when you're in nature, it would happen when you're starving or when you're fasting. And in the modern world, it can be replicated with carbohydrate restriction and eliminating carbohydrates from a diet. That is also going to allow your liver to start producing those ketone bodies eventually. And the ketogenic diet is just that. It's going to deplete your liver glycogen stores, which will then allow the liver to start producing ketone bodies from either the fat that you eat from the food or from your own adipose tissue again. So yeah, the ketogenic diet is a low carb, high fat, and moderate protein diet that is going to shift you into this ketogenic fat burning metabolic state that's going to provide an alternative fuel source for the brain and muscle tissue as well. And when it comes to self-empowerment and ketosis, then I think ketosis is like this very innate and natural state that our body actually thrives under. And without ketosis, we probably wouldn't have survived the savannah, or we wouldn't have survived ice ages. So it's like an invaluable survival mechanism for dealing with deprivation of nutrients and food. So there are also like many other health benefits to ketosis. Like research is showing it's used against epilepsy, cancer, even diabetes, obesity, and many other chronic health issues that is so common in modern world. And definitely like the cognitive benefits are also great, neuroprotective benefits for the brain. And ketones actually are better for the brain as a fuel source and more stable energy and reduced hunger. So if you're trying to, improve yourself as a person, then ketosis should be implemented into your diet strategy to some extent, because your brain literally or your mind will always only function to the extent of how healthy you are and how clean your body is and how well you can produce energy. Everything is connected to how well your mitochondria can produce energy and what's the state of your gut. And if you're inflamed, if you're bloated, if you're diseased, then you literally don't have enough room for self-actualization. Like even in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the foundation of the pyramid are the first physiological needs of nutrition, calories, security, safety. And then there's the other pillars, which are like self-actualization and social hierarchies.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to Abraham Maslow there, right? Now, just in terms of your own experience with ketosis, because I always ask people, because we each have our individual benefits. I checked myself on the ketone meter before getting on the line with you. I'm in some mild form of nutritional ketosis, but what sort of benefits have you personally experienced? It sounds, given what you do all the time, it sounds like cognition is a big focus, but what personal benefits have you experienced?
Like I didn't have any health conditions or overweight issues before I started keto. I started it as a way of experimenting and wanting to reap the longevity and the cognitive benefits. Indeed, yeah. The biggest benefits that I've seen are it's very easy to not get hungry during the day, and your energy levels are so stable, and you're not really that dependent of consuming food or anything like that. You're always able to have enough energy to do your focus work. You don't even suffer any negative side effects of fatigue or exhaustion when you're exercising or something like that. You literally have access to your own body fat, and you can tap into those infinite sources of calories, because even lean people with under 10% body fat, they still have 50,000 calories with them all the time. So the problem is never that you don't have enough energy on your body. The problem is that your body doesn't know how to access that energy, and if there's some sort of a discrepancy or dichotomy or a bottleneck that is preventing you from burning your body fat. And ketosis conditions your body to know how to use that fat fuel, and it's gonna carry over to basically all aspects of your life, and starting from doing some sort of cognitively demanding work, reading, memorizing things, or sleeping better, or exercising. And definitely the best benefits, in my opinion, are the freedom from food, basically, and the ability to become more efficient with burning your own body fat.
So we've talked a little bit about ketosis, and some people may be wondering, and you also before I get into that, you mentioned one of the benefits that I find to be chiefly available, which is the metabolic flexibility. How do you coach people to get into ketosis? Because there's a lot out there on, particularly in the US, but also in Europe, exogenous ketones as being a method of getting into it, but also eating carb restrictive for a while, as well as fasting. Is there any way that you particularly recommend? And then probably I'll ask you a second question on exogenous ketones here in a second.
It would depend on the particular individual and what's their metabolic condition and what's their training level and lean muscle mass and what's their goals as well. But in general, like the blueprint for becoming keto adapted is to first start eating the ketogenic diet and to condition your body to use fat as a fuel source, because it requires a short period of time where you need to eliminate the carbohydrates and to give your body a break, in a sense of you have to get rid of the carbs so that your liver could start producing its own ketones over the course of some longer period of time. It involves some of the other digestive pathways or digestive enzymes have to be also reconstructed in the liver. So eventually you will learn how to burn more fat at higher intensities of exercise and even gain some of the benefits of building muscle with it. And it simply requires a longer period of time for that to happen. So what I generally recommend people to do is get rid of all the processed carbohydrates, fructose even, and fruit, avoid it as well. Some starchy tubers, eliminate all those grains and legumes, peas, everything that has higher amounts of carbohydrates have to be eliminated. And what you eat instead are these low carb vegetables like broccoli, cabbage, and spinach and things like that, and some fatty meats, some steak, beef, eggs, fish, and those sorts of things. And as an additional fat source, you would add things like butter, olive oils, and MCT oils, and those are things like that. You can accelerate keto adaptation and you can accelerate getting into ketosis by fasting for many days in a row, but it's not going to be that ideal if you're doing it for the first time. I would recommend people to eat a low carb keto diet for at least a few days before trying any extended fasts, because if you're coming off from a carb based metabolism, then first of all, it's much more difficult for you to fast. And secondly, you're also more prone to muscle catabolism because of that, because you're so carb dependent. So using that shorter, a few days of eating keto beforehand, it acts like a buffer zone or a preparation for the longer fast. So generally eat keto for a few days, then you can have like a longer fast to really ramp up that ketone production and get into ketosis. And after the fast, you still have to continue eating like a well-structured keto diet, and then implement some exercise into it to even enforce burning fat even more.
Siim, what's your opinion on exogenous ketones? Because these have become quite the rage in the supplement industry lately. What's your view?
Exogenous ketones are they're like the supplements, ketone body supplements. Specifically this one ketone body called beta-hydroxybutyrate that is attached to different kinds of salts like sodium, magnesium, potassium, or calcium. So the idea is that if you consume them as a supplement, then you're going to elevate your blood ketones and you're going to hypothetically be in ketosis. Well, the problem is that there's a difference between endogenous ketosis, which is coming from your inside your body, and exogenous ketosis, which is coming from a supplement. When you're taking exogenous ketones, then you're inhibiting your liver's endogenous production of its own ketones, and that's going to suppress. It's going to suppress, first of all, it's going to suppress fat burning, and second of all, it's not going to put you into ketosis for the long term. You're going to only have like elevated level of ketone bodies in your blood as long as those supplements are in your bloodstream as well. As long as that supplement runs out, then you're going to basically go back into what you were before, whether that be if you've done keto for long term, then you're going to go back to that same level that you were before. And if you've eaten a carb-based diet, then you're going to fall out of ketosis after the supplement runs out. So definitely exogenous ketones aren't a miracle supplement that are going to make you burn fat and put you into ketosis for the long term. They can be used in some circumstances as a performance assistant, or to at least provide some fuel source during the initial period when you may feel slightly taxed from energy, but they're not as miracle drug as people say they are. And definitely they're not a fat loss supplement as well, because they literally shut down the liver's ability to convert its own body fat into energy, and you're only burning those exogenous ketones, not your own body fat. So as a fat loss supplements, they're definitely not worth it, and they're hugely overpriced as well in terms of fat. Like literally they cost maybe like 10 times more than the actual manufacturing cost or something like that, and the people are selling them because they're like really hyped up and overvalued in a sense. They can be used like definitely as a performance assistant for athletes and things like that. But if you're taking them when you're sitting on a couch or something like that, then you're literally not burning any body fat for at least as long as those supplements are in your bloodstream.
Yeah, you can't really outsource the work that you need to do, right?
Yeah.
So just on that, so my understanding of the ketone supplements is that there's salts and esters. Does what you just say apply to both salts and esters, or just to salts in particular?
Well, I haven't experimented a lot with the esters, but from a metabolic perspective, I would say they would work the same way, because they're simply going to elevate the ketones, and eventually it's going to still run out. Like even though the ketone esters are going to raise your ketone bodies by like a lot more than the BHB salts, then it's not going to stay there for like the rest of the day or something. It's going to eventually still run out.
It's not permanent, right?
Yeah.
So one aspect of the ketogenic diet that a lot of people don't like, in particular when they're first starting, is the keto flu. I've seen a YouTube video that you put together on how to avoid the keto flu. Do you mind just giving people a few tips on how to avoid that?
Yeah, sure. Like the keto flu is one of the scariest things that people experience during the keto diet, and it's one of those things that makes them quit as well. So usually the keto flu happens because the body's undergoing a small energy crisis in terms of not knowing how to burn its own body fat, essentially. And another one of the issue is because the body actually loses some of its, or it tends to lose some of the electrolytes that it holds on to when you're eating a carb-based diet. When you're eating carbohydrates, then you're also going to experience slightly higher levels of insulin and blood sugar just by virtue of eating carbohydrates. So that makes the kidneys hold onto more water, and it's also going to hold onto these minerals like magnesium, potassium, and calcium, and sodium and others. So if you're avoiding carbohydrates or eliminating them completely, then you're going to have lower insulin, lower blood sugar, and that's going to make the kidneys release more water. You're going to hold on to less water. You're going to maybe become dehydrated. That's another issue why you feel tired. And you also, if you're excreting a lot of water, then you're also excreting the electrolytes. So yeah, definitely it can be fixed or avoided by increasing your sodium intake and adding some other electrolytes into your diet as well. And one of the easiest ways is to simply salt your food. Maybe you can take some magnesium supplements, some potassium supplements, things like bone broth, bouillon cubes, pickle juice, sauerkraut, fermented foods. Those things are very salty, and they definitely can be useful for having more energy during the initial period. And definitely, like if you're eating a low carb diet, then you would want to be consuming more sodium by default, because you don't hold on to it. And it's not going to raise your blood pressure either because of low insulin. And other things that are also essential are like things like sleep and getting exposure to natural sunlight. Those things are all very, very important. And it's not just diet that is making you feel a certain way, or it's not just diet or nutrition that is influencing your mitochondria's ability to produce energy. Everything is connected with it. Your environment, your relationships, your emotions, your exercise, your sleep patterns, those things are quite essential as well.
And I want to go into that a little bit more and when we talk about your routine, because I saw something very interesting on your routine. One of the reasons why I reached out to you, and I told you this right away, is keto bodybuilding and really just keeping muscle on, or actually adding muscle when you're in ketosis? Because personally, I found that if I add more carbohydrates to my diet, I can put on muscle relatively quick. But how do you do it personally? And I'll link to the book in the show notes, but how do you do it personally where you're able to add muscle in ketosis? Are you eating more of like a modified Atkins? So do you elevate protein levels, or how do you do it?
There are like many ways you can add muscle on keto. Like, for instance, I'm going to first go like what are the requirements for building muscle, and then I'm going to give you like the different strategies. So the 4 conditions for building muscle are adequate training stimulus, which is basically you have to cause damage to muscles and do some resistance training. You lift weights or do body weight exercises, whatever it may be. Secondly, you have to eat enough protein to stimulate protein synthesis, so it could be used for building new tissue. Thirdly, you need to have the right hormones like testosterone and growth hormone and things like that. And also, like the last bit is consume extra calories so that you would have, adequate amounts of energy. In terms of lifting heavy stuff, then you can do it quite easily in a sense of it's very common amongst bodybuilders that you need to squeeze the living juice out of every rep and set. But in reality, the key for getting stronger and building muscle is to get stronger, and that can be done gradually as a long-term thing. The main components of building muscle on keto is to get stronger and lift some heavy weights, and then eat enough food in the form of some protein and other macronutrients. So you don't really need carbohydrates to trigger muscle protein synthesis. The key to activating muscle protein synthesis is this amino acid called leucine, which can be found in all the keto-friendly foods like eggs and meats and so on. So generally, you would mainly want to focus on getting your daily protein intake, and you don't even have to worry about eating carbohydrates or spiking your insulin with those. So generally, what I recommend people to do is to aim for about 0.8 to 1.0 grams per pound of lean body mass for protein. Because, the truth is that the strict therapeutic ketogenic diet is quite low in protein, or it's very restricted, and it's not optimal for building muscle or anything like that. Most people, they don't even need to pay attention to their ketone levels that much, or they don't need to worry about getting kicked out of ketosis. And they can safely consume slightly more protein, which can have like a contributing effect to slightly more protein synthesis and building muscle. So if you're trying to focus on building muscle and strength and you don't have diabetes or epilepsy, then you can safely consume slightly more protein on keto and not even have to worry about it.
Calculating lean body mass, the way I traditionally do it is with a DEXA scan. But for somebody that doesn't have that, would you recommend getting calipers or just sort of a body fat measurement?
Yeah, like you can always go into the minutia and get caught up with the details. Like in reality, it's unless you're like a professional athlete or you have like a physique competition, then it's not something that I would want to pay attention to just because of the distractions or something like that. But yeah, generally you can kind of guesstimate your body fat percentage as well, and then subtract it from your current body weight. In my case, I weigh around 76 kilograms, and my guesstimate body fat percentage is around 10 or something around there. Then it's gonna be about 7.5 kilos will be my body fat. So my lean body mass would be maybe like 69 or 70 kilos.
Mm-hmm. Now, the question that's on everybody's mind, actually, and people that are sort of staring at this from the outside, is ketosis for everybody? Yeah,
it's a good question. Like it has been shown to be very effective for treating a lot of diseases, and it's been shown to be even a lot of comparative studies also show that low carbohydrate diets are better for weight loss, actually, at least in terms of adherence. Generally, I would recommend for everyone to do the keto diet at least once, just to kind of build up their fat burning metabolism and teach their mitochondria to produce ketone or to use ketones for energy, and to teach the liver to create these fat burning pathways inside of it. So the problem is that in the modern world, we don't really tap into these ketogenic pathways because we have like access to food all the time. We rarely even fast. We have high amounts of sugar in our diets and all those things that are going to inhibit the body's endogenous ability to produce its own ketones and to use it. So yeah, definitely, it's a shame in my opinion, because ketosis is such an invaluable part of our evolution, and it's such a powerful tool for our physiology. So you can only benefit from it by at least, adapting to it for at least like once, and then kind of cycling on and off of it. You don't need to do it, year round all the time, but it's generally a good idea to have these periods of low carb dieting, of fasting, and maybe it's also a good idea to shake things up and eat some carbs again. So it's very primary in my opinion.
Okay, so for you, and just asking sort of in your everyday life, how, if you give percentages, what percentage are you in sort of ketosis versus, or following a ketogenic diet versus, I guess, either carb backloading or just sort of in a normal, what we call a normal diet these days?
Yeah, I would say like I'm probably eating a keto diet 90% of the time. Whenever I do eat something different, then it would be something along the lines of a single carb backloading meal post-workout, maybe like a few times per month or something like that at max. Because generally I don't feel, after so many years of doing it, you kind of get better at it, even the longer you do it as well. And you start to feel even better with using simply fat, and you become less dependent of carbohydrates even. But every once in a while, I think I still use it as a way to promote metabolic flexibility and to not lose the ability to metabolize carbohydrates either. So yeah, it's never a good idea to go straight into one direction completely and block yourself from all the other possibilities, because it's gonna make you more susceptible to variation.
I think one of the key benefits I see to ketosis is that metabolic flexibility.
Yeah.
My only questioning on people who go into a ketogenic diet is how they do it, because there's certain percentage of the population, for instance, that we know from genetic testing that won't benefit well from things like butter or saturated fat in general. But I'm fully supportive of those who are willing to try for the metabolic flexibility. And frankly, I love it. I mean, it's just a great way to enhance cognition, etc.
Yeah.
One of the other points you mentioned, and we've kind of danced around a little bit, was fasting. Do you mind taking us through sort of how you fast? I've seen a few videos of you doing prolonged fasts. I would love to hear just sort of why 16/8 versus something like a 5-day fast.
Yeah, like fasting is one of the best ways of inducing ketosis and one of the most natural ways of doing it. And hunter-gatherers, they wouldn't eat a keto diet or something. They would go into ketosis just by virtue of fasting and not eating anything. So yeah, like fasting is even more natural in this sense, and something that we don't really do anymore. And in terms of different types of fasts, the effect of the fast is gonna depend on the length of it, definitely, and also what's the reason for the fast, what's the purpose of it. If you're doing it as a way of simply restricting your time when you're eating, like along the lines of the 16 and 8 hour or the warrior diet with 20 hours of fasting and 4 hours of eating, then it's a very good way to kind of confine yourself, to give yourself some positive restriction as to be more productive during the day, as to prevent overeating with your daily calories, and also feeling more satiated with the food that you eat. I would say that you definitely don't need to eat like 3 square meals a day, because at least one of them is gonna be
What about 6? Because that's a crazy one.
The more the better. Yeah. Like it's gonna be not. It's not gonna do you any good, and chances are that it's gonna be metabolized inefficiently. I would also always suggest that at least, the minimum I would suggest everyone to do is the 16 and 8 hour window every day, no matter what, because you rarely really even go into a fasted state overnight. If let's say you eat dinner at 8 o'clock at nighttime, and then it's going to take you at least an additional 4 to 6 hours for your body to digest the food that you ate last night. So you only actually start fasting in the middle of the night, somewhere between. So when you wake up in the morning, then you haven't actually gone into a fasted state, and you haven't reaped any of the metabolic benefits, like reducing inflammation, giving your digestive system a break, and also like activating the autophagy aspect of it, which is like cellular recycling of old cells into new cells. So yeah, definitely 16 and 8 is the minimum I would recommend everyone to. And the longer you kind of go on from there, then the more health benefits are you're going to get from the fast. Things like, more autophagy, more stem cell growth, reduced inflammation even more. And they actually say that the greatest benefits of fasting come from these extended fasts that last for longer than 48 hours. And so that's when the autophagy and stem cells really start to be mobilized. And also like 3 days of fasting is going to reset your immune system. So yeah, I always try to implement at least one of these longer fasts for 3 to 5 days or something like that every quarter of the year, at least at minimum, to kind of keep myself healthy, to keep my metabolism more flexible as well, and to boost longevity. Like it's one of the best anti-aging strategies in my opinion. There is a lot of research showing that it's gonna help with fighting cancer, tumors, all these diseases, and like Hippocrates himself said that fasting is the best medicine, or something along the lines of that. So like in my opinion, fasting can be used for so many other things, and I definitely encourage people to try it out, at least in some shape or form.
If people want to check this out, there's a book called The Longevity Diet by Walter Longo. He goes into a lot of the research on this, as well as sort of the fast mimicking diet, which I think is a separate discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But one of the videos that I love of yours, Siim, and I'll link to this in the show notes, is how you break your fasts. Do you mind talking a little bit about the use of apple cider vinegar and lemon water?
Yeah, sure. Like I recall this quote from George Bernard Shaw, which is like, every fool can fast, but only a wise man knows how to break it, or something like that. So yeah, it's equally as important to know how to break a fast than it is to how to do it. So you definitely don't want to start eating anything random and cause more gut distress or something like that, because yeah, you've been avoiding food, and you need to kind of ease into it in a strategic way to promote the right digestive enzymes and to mobilize the gut microbiome in a sense. So what I generally recommend is to start off with this hot lemon water with some actual lemon squeezed into the water, and maybe like 2 to 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar mixed into it. And that's going to be really good for the digestive enzymes. It's going to promote blood flow in the gut as well. It's going to activate certain receptors in the intestine walls as well. And that's going to help you to absorb the food better. It's going to help you to digest it. And it's going to prevent any constipation or some sort of a dysbiosis in the feeding phase afterwards. So that's the first thing you would want to always break a fast with. And I would even suggest you can do it. I consume like apple cider vinegar every day. Like even if I'm doing like daily intermittent fasting, then I'm still going to take it before my meals. And I'm still going to take it after my meals as well. So it's a good way to lower blood sugar and lower insulin. So yeah, it's like generally a very good, healthy addition to the diet.
Okay, so fasting is similar to ketosis. Should we be doing it every day? Or is it one of those things, 16-8 fasting, one could argue we can do every day, but is it good to take a break and sort of do this in cycles? And if so, how would you cycle fasting?
In theory, it is a good idea to keep your body guessing and to cycle everything you do in terms of nutrition, at least to like small variations. But in my opinion, like you don't really need to cycle off the daily intermittent fasting of 16 and 8 or something, because like I mentioned, it's not really fasting. Like it's simply time restricted feeding, where you're simply confining your eating window. Like you really don't start fasting only. You start fasting only in the middle of the night, and by noon time, it's like 12 or 14 hours, which isn't that long. It's simply like you skip a meal, and it's not going to have any negative side effects or something. And adding an additional meal as a breakfast or something is not going to have any additional benefit either. It may have to do with if you're trying to really boost your metabolism, or if you're coming off a really starvation diet or something like that, then it can be a good idea to eat more frequently just because you need to nourish your body. But for the general population, I don't really see the need to be eating or to add like this cycling off the fasting.
General population in the United States, 33% of people are obese. So it's pretty crazy. All right, Siim, let's turn our attention a little bit to your routine, because there is a blog post on Aura, which I know they're right across the water from you guys, but I happen to get along well with the guys from Aura. I've had Chuck Hazard on the podcast before, and I love your daily routine. Do you mind just taking us through sort of how your mornings look?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of love to have this very structured daily routine because I think like it's my secret to being productive and getting things done, while at the same time doing it in a very stress-free manner and getting more results with less effort, which is like biohacking in a sense. And what my daily routine or morning routine looks like is that after I wake up, then I'm gonna go outside. Definitely, that's the most important part, to go outside and expose myself to the elements and get some natural sunlight into my system. It's gonna offset the proper circadian rhythm, and that's gonna help me to sleep better at night. It's gonna activate all the other metabolic processes and hormones. So it's incredibly important to keep yourself in sync with the actual daily circadian rhythm where you're living. And when I go outside, then I maybe do maybe a few breathing exercises, some stretching, just to get the blood moving again and to mobilize myself. After that, I will come back inside, maybe meditate, or I will definitely meditate, but I might do it like sometimes I do it on my acupuncture mattress. Sometimes I do it by sitting down. Depends on the day, how I feel. After that, I will then use this red light therapy device that I have, and it's a really good way to promote this mitochondrial functioning. It's gonna reduce inflammation again and skin health, and it's another one of those great tools we can use to optimize our health.
I'm going to ask a few more sort of specific questions because I like to tease these things out, obviously. All right, going back to the time spent outside, how long are you outside for? And are you doing this barefoot, I imagine, for the earthing benefits or other reasons?
I'm going to go outside like straight from the bed. So yeah, I would be like barefoot and with only my underwear. So, luckily, I live on the countryside, so there's no other people to look around.
I do it in the middle of Amsterdam, so it's okay. Going outside. What about your breathing exercises? Any specific breathing exercises that you're doing?
I usually do like simple deep breathing and into the diaphragm, in through the nose and out through the mouth or something. I don't have like a specific breathing exercise that I'm doing, like the Wim Hof method or something like that, unless I'm specifically trying to do it as a way of, oxygenizing myself for some reason. But it's not in my routine that I do every day. But yeah, I do like maybe a few deep breaths, a few cycles of some deep breaths. And usually it may also involve some yoga movements. Like maybe I start off at a deep squat. And as I inhale through the nose, then I maybe like rise up to the top and raise my arms above my head as well. And as I'm exhaling, I'm going back into the deep squat. So it resembles like this sort of a really thorough breathing cycle.
And that last question from that one is the red light device that you use. Are you using Juve? Are you using Sauna Space? Which one do you use? Or did you construct your own?
I wish I could do it but yeah, I'm using this brand Red Light Man from the United Kingdom. So okay. Yeah, they have a really pretty good device, and it's cheaper than the Juve. So it's closer as well, so you can avoid the shipping.
Yeah, exactly. The Juve device is a little pricey. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, they're the most popular ones, so they have their authority.
So, Siim, this has been super helpful, but I have final questions for you in terms of just questions that I ask all of our guests. My first question is what's your top trick that you use to enhance focus?
I would say that by default, my best ability to stay focused is simply going through sheer amounts of repetition in terms of trying to stay focused. I've been writing my blog for like 4 years. I've been doing YouTube videos for nearly 2 years, and I've been doing it like every day, every morning. The first hours of my day are always spent doing some sort of deep work where I'm focusing hard on this one thing, whatever it may be, like a video or a blog post or doing some research, whatever it may be. And I'm always very deliberate about it and conscientious in terms of avoiding all distractions, eliminating them completely, keeping myself in this Jedi-like concentration mode. that is literally like I'm telling myself different affirmations in terms of directing my focus and keeping my phone on airplane mode. And I believe like that's the ability of reconstructing your brain networks and through the process of neuroplasticity. And after so many years of doing it, I've simply built up this ability to stay focused no matter what, as long as I simply say that it's go time and I turn on the blinders, so to say.
What's your favorite book on peak performance?
I would say that it's gonna be Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. So it's a book about flow, this optimal state of consciousness where you're so immersed by the task you're doing. And that really had a good impact on me because, I gained the insight of how can I go into this creative genius mode where I'm so immersed by the thing that I'm doing that nothing else matters. And that's my purpose with all these deep work sessions that I'm doing every day. I want to go into flow. I want to go into the rabbit hole so deep that I'm going to get lost in there, and who knows what's going to be discovered. That's where all my best work come from. Something so dedicating it to my subconscious mind to do the work for me. Almost.
It's very cool. I mean, I like the fact that you're going back to the research because Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was the guy who discovered flow, or at least published on it. So that book in particular, I love it. It's a little bit more dry than Stealing Fire per se, but it's very good.
Yeah, he has many other books as well. Like in addition to flow, like he has researched it a lot, like creativity and flow. Then there's books like The Orthothelic Person or something, which translates to this person who is doing something just because of the intrinsic motivation he gets from it. He's doing the art just for the sake of the art, not for getting the results or getting some sort of achievement.
Siim, this has been fantastic. Thank you for covering everything ketosis, fasting, and frankly, your morning routines are fascinating to me. Where can people find out more about you?
It's been a pleasure talking to you as well, and I really enjoyed it. So my website is siimland.com. You can find me on YouTube as well, Siim Land, and my own podcast is a Body Mind Empowerment with Siim Land. So it's Siim Land on all the social platforms.
Beautiful. We'll link to all of this in the show notes. Siim, thank you again for taking the time. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Yeah,
it's been a pleasure, and I really enjoyed it. And I'll see you around.
Awesome. To all the superhumans out there for listening, thank you so much. Superhuman amigos, one last plug before we go. Remember, Biohackers Summit in Tallinn, Estonia on September 15th. You're combining two of my favorite things, which is biohacking and Tallinn, which is an amazing city and actually a very, very healthy city. And you should all go. September 15th. We'll link to that one in the show notes. Again, the show notes are at decodingsuperhuman.com/Siim. That's SIIM. And also, if you want to leave a review in iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, if they even take reviews, it would be really appreciated because we're having experts like Siim on all the time, and it does help to get the word out. So thank you so much for listening once again, and have an epic day.